Well, I think we should see if anybody in the audience has a direction for us to go. If there's anybody out there in listener land that has a topic you'd like to speak about, questions, thoughts, something you need support with, push 1. And or if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, if you dial into the show directly, the number is 563-999-3581. Calling that number will put you into the queue, or pardon me, have you listening directly to the show. And then if you push 1, that'll raise a hand, and Jeannie will know you want to talk to us. So, do you have a thought for us? Do you have something you'd like us to address? Do you have a direction you'd like us to go? And Ms. Jeannie, do we have anybody out there with a thought for us or a hand up? Or
no, but I will just say, it's amazing how people create their own realities. And, we had a question the other day, and you addressed it beautifully, someone wanting us to translate or to interpret for them someone's saying. And we did that. You did that. Did a marvelous job of it. And they wrote back, and I had sent them the link, and I said, we addressed this today, and here's the link to the show. And they wrote back and said, do you have to correct me every time I say something? And I'm like, well, you ask us to give an interpretation or our interpretation of it, and that's what we did. And he's like, you're not listening, or you don't want to listen. And he went into all kinds of stuff, and I finally just said, I quit. I'm not having this conversation. So it's really funny how he asked for assistance and then totally turned it around that it was somehow putting him down. I don't know.
Well, everybody's got a reality, and in any given circumstance, whatever trigger, and who knows what triggers something in the mind. The objective, of course, individually, is to recognize that if it brings something that's not based in love forward in me, then what I want to do is apply the tool of forgiveness and process through whatever that is. So who knows? And maybe that gentleman's listening and could share more about what that meant, why that response, what's happening, and maybe we can be of support and open up whatever. Other than that, do we have anybody with a hand up in the folk queue or anything happening in the chat room?
Nope, it is all quiet.
Well, in that case, I'm going to kind of do a bit of a review of what forgiveness is. And one of the first cautions that I offer to people, and you've probably heard me say it before, I say it often, is never, ever, ever forgive anyone for anything. And never forgive yourself for anything. And I oftentimes get the response, well, wait a minute, I thought you were about forgiveness. Yes, I will offer you, learn to forgive continuously, like at, just about every moment of your life. Learn to forgive, but never forgive anyone. And people are like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? How does that make sense? Well, forgiveness has nothing whatsoever to do with what we've been taught about forgiving each other or being forgiven. There's no such thing as being forgiven. There's no such thing as forgiving anyone. That comes from a total, complete bastardization of the word forgive, of the whole idea of forgiveness. And sadly, our culture has been just bamboozled by this idea that, and it comes out of a religious philosophy, and it's the religious philosophy of the one world universal religion of blame, of which the Greek mindset is a master. And so if you go to the Greeks, you find that, in essence, here's how forgiveness is presented. You did something really terrible that caused all this pain inside of me, but it's okay. I'll forgive you. I'll let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. And we suggest you never, we don't suggest that you never let anyone off the hook. because that can be a very appropriate thing to do. That can be a generous thing to do, and that can open a space for healing. But to call that forgiveness is a fraud. You do something that is off the mark, and with truth, is illegal, criminal, whatever, and I choose to let you off the hook. I have pardoned you. I have not forgiven you. And so choose to pardon someone if you wish. That's awesome. And then recognize that if in a situation, a given situation where you feel like there's someone that needs to be pardoned, that someone has no need of your forgiveness, you do. And your forgiveness is the act of going inside of yourself and removing what's at the root of your pain. So the Greek mindset, the one world universal religion of blame, tells you that you let other people off the hook for what's going on inside of you, and somehow that's supposed to make your life better. Now, in some cases, it will make a shift, and the shift is that by pardoning you, I can disconnect the part of my mind that's in trauma around you, and therefore drop the trauma in your presence. But that doesn't resolve my trauma. If you do a behavior that resonates a trauma in me, I have need of forgiveness. That doesn't mean I have need of somebody to let me off the hook. It means that I need to understand that there's an energetic pattern inside of me that if I choose to be free of it, I enact forgiveness and remove whatever that energy is about, whatever that pattern is. And so when we're talking about forgiveness, we're not talking about letting somebody off the hook. Hence, forgive continuously, but never forgive anyone. So true forgiveness technology is a how-to that Yeshua taught 2,000 years ago. And it's a simple tool that was understood and used, not believed in or just talked about as general theory, but it's a tool that removes any form of suffering, pain, fear, and or hostility from within, and empowers one to wake up to the truth about who they are. If we become lost in some form of hostility or fear, we've lost awareness of who we are as human beings. Who we are as human beings always remains. The active presence of love is always there. Hence, and this one has just been on my mind a lot lately, so I brought it up the last couple of days, that statement from A Course in Miracles that enlightenment, as we've done with the study of that book, is but a recognition. The recognition of who you are, it's not a change. So awakening to the truth of who you are. So forgiveness has nothing to do with the Greek act of pardoning that we've been falsely taught is forgiveness. What the world generally presents today, this idea of letting someone else or themselves off the hook, is a total anomaly. It's a result of the gross twisting of the meaning of forgiveness, which means the tool of forgiveness has been disappeared. If I let you off the hook and I think I've forgiven, I leave my pain fully intact to raise its ugly head another day. So if one is in the experience of rage, of fear, of pain, confusion, or the myriad of other disturbed states that arouse blame in most people, the original Aramaic teaching on forgiveness guided the suffering individual on an inward journey of discovery and removal. It taught a strictly internal process that empowers one to free themselves from the hidden cause of suffering by removing the corrupt energetic influences that never belonged within them as human beings. So actual forgiveness is a process, a tool for mining and removing untoward influences from my own mind, my own body, my own nervous system. The process includes the acknowledgement that some form of internal pain, fear or hostility has been aroused. And with forgiveness, I collapse the construct containing the pain so that I can directly access, embrace, and transmute with the active presence of love the destructive energies underlying my repeating pattern of pain, thereby transforming and removing that from my life. This is true Aramaic forgiveness. And it only happens, a step in the process, a key in the process, is that it happens in the space of conscious, active, present love. That's one of the steps. Now, if that makes sense and you've never done the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop, then we invite you to go to our YouTube page. And to do that, you go to, of course, YouTube and type in Michael Rice, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, R-Y-C-E, and then look for Why Is This Happening to Me Again? There's a 3-hour, I believe it's actually about a 3-hour and 20-minute workshop that I did back in June of 22. It's the most recent rendition of the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop. And you can go through the whole process where we lay out the worksheet step by step. We have an app for that. If you go to your app store on your phone, whether you've got an iPhone or an Android phone, and you type in the words Heartland, Heartland, Aramaic forgiveness, you'll be looking at an app that pops up with a red glowing heart. And that is our totally private, and we purposely designed it so that the app is completely 100% private. Nobody can access what you put in there, so you can put whatever you choose, whatever private information. You're the only one that will ever see it. You'll note that the app requires only one permission, and that is to access the internet so that it can operate. When you complete a worksheet, there's a step-by-step worksheet process in the app. Then you have the option of saving it, and if you do that, the app will ask for one more permission. That is, it has to save it somewhere, and of course you direct it to save it to your drive. So the app is there. There's also a PowerPoint presentation that you might want to look at on our YouTube channel. And if you just look, there's one PowerPoint, and if you go through that, it gives there was a gentleman who came and did teacher training back several years ago, and his thing was PowerPoint, which has never been my thing. And he said, "Hey, Michael, I'm really loving this." He did our teacher training, and he's like, "I'd like to put this into a PowerPoint that people can make sense of why and how the process you're teaching works." And so thank you to Bill Costantino for doing that. And it goes through, I think it's 22 minutes or something. So that's there to walk you through the whole process. So when you recognize that there's been generations and generations of gathering of dark influences that people have had no idea are their own, because every time they come up, they have a conversation about how it's somebody else's fault, never realizing that having been through it 87 different times with 42 different people, they're the only one that was there every time. So there's been this generational gathering of these energetic patterns based in hostility or fear that have been mindlessly passed from generation to generation. And again, forgiveness of these internally generated dynamics had nothing to do with forgiving self or others. It's the removal of the abusive energy that never belonged that is the act of forgiving. So to apply, forgive them, as we're told Yeshua said And there's an interesting little thing that happens when you go to the Aramaic. You never hear Yeshua saying, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." It isn't there. What it says is, "Forgive as to those who know not what they do." So if a certain circumstance happens that brings some form of hostility or fear forward in you, it brings that hostility or fear forward in you because it's in you. A cute little story I like to tell about that. Kind of sets the scene for the process. You're drinking coffee, and someone bumps your arm and your coffee spills. Why did the coffee spill? The spill obviously occurred because of the bump on your arm, but the reason for the coffee being all over everything is not because that person bumped your arm. It's because there was coffee in your cup. That you spilled and what you spilled are two totally different matters. And this metaphor, I think, really helps to pinpoint that this game that the mind plays. So that you spilled something was a whole different thing from what you spilled. But the mind tends to blend them into one and get stuck in the conclusion, and the conclusion seems logical. I spilled my coffee because you bumped my arm. No, I spilled what was in my cup because you bumped my arm. Yes. If there'd been tea in the cup, then I wouldn't have spilled coffee. I'd have spilled tea. If it had been orange juice, obviously the mess to be cleaned up would have been orange juice. The spill had to do with being bumped, and the coffee was the content of the cup. The non-thinking mind, a mind with little discernment, tends to see the spill and the content as one and the same. But they're not, and this is such an important metaphor in the arena of forgiveness. You know, it's inevitable. Life is going to bump and squeeze you, and me, and everybody else. And whatever content we're holding comes out again and again and again, often against our own will and choice. But it comes out. For what reason? Well, if you ask yourself the question, what's in my cup? You know, it's kind of like, well, when under stress, what seeps into awareness and oozes out of me? Is it love, joy, aliveness, enthusiasm, gratitude, serenity? Or is it the self-inflicted disease states of fear, frustration, rage, sarcasm, put down, and attack? Are there qualities of energy that lead to errant thinking? Energies that distort our perception, decisions, behaviors, and experiences? Yeshua, the man that's generally referred to as Jesus, 2,000 years ago in the book of Thomas was invited to return attack for attack, and you know, he gives us the epitome of the lesson of this little thing about, you know, spilling what's in your cup. When they say to Yeshua, why don't you suck it to him? Why don't you give those Pharisees back some of their own medicine? In essence, that's what the disciples say to him. He says, I have none of that in my store. Like, you can't make me spill coffee if there's no coffee in my cup. Yes, if there's orange juice in my cup and you hit my arm, yes, there will be a spill of orange juice, but it will only because that's what's in my store. So if life comes along and squeezes you and squeezes you and squeezes you, and for some reason you're always blaming whatever it is that's squeezed out of you on someone else, you've got to start asking yourself the question, what's in your store? You know, long ago, for most, far, far beneath recall, somewhere in our past, perhaps even in our genes, destructive decisions were made. Content was installed. Few understand that early interactions with a power person sets the stage, and of course that stage can be changed, for what comes up and out when we're squeezed, when life pressures us. Now, a power person is someone in our lives who, at a given moment, was not functioning as love and had more control over our lives than we did. If we perceive that circumstance as survival, then the power person dynamic that would tend to control our whole lives was set in place in that situation. Now, if you've been abandoned, attacked, victimized, either verbally, physically, or sexually abused, the voices and behaviors that perpetrated that offense will attempt to speak through you as your voice. The abusive father tends to raise an abusive son. The daughter of a degrading, critical mother has difficult responding to stress with anything other than degrading criticism. When under stress, those dynamics will tend to control your perceptions, your emotions, your thoughts, your words, your decisions, and your behaviors. And without the internal Aramaic forgiveness process, this is what will tend to run your life for your whole life. Oftentimes, if you haven't noticed, prompting you to carry out actions against your own will and choice. Actions that later you cry to yourself over having done it and say, why did I do that? The only reason you have ever done anything in your life is because that is in your store. It's the only reason you've ever done anything. It's because what you did is in your store. Now, of course, the mind will tend to say, no, I did it because they did this. No, they were just a squeeze. The content is your own content. The reason you do what you do is because it's there. And when we're under the influence of the power person dynamic, my offering would be that there are only 3 possible behaviors until that dynamic is faced in the light of truth, resolved, and forgiven. And when I say it needs to be forgiven, I'm not referring to anything that resembles saying it needs to be let off the hook. Again, whenever you hear the Greek translations of the scriptures talking about how Yeshua told someone to forgive, they never say, forgive Bill for what he did. The words are, and the 2 words that are always missing, forgive as to Bill. In other words, if I interact with Bill and Bill resonates something painful in me, there is nothing for me to forgive Bill for. Now, Bill might have done something terrible, awful, evil, ugly, nasty, wicked, and any other descriptor you want to give it, but what he did isn't the cause of what's moving in me. The cause of what's moving in me is the fact that what's moving in me is in me. So forgive as to. So you do a behavior that shows me my rage, and I go, oh, thank you. I've been hiding that rage for myself for so long, I thought I'd gotten rid of it. Thanks for showing it to me. I realize that I have another piece of work to do around this thing called rage. So forgiveness is a master healing tool. Which dynamic runs the mind in any given moment when it comes to the power person dynamic will be determined by the level of stress we're under. And through unconsciously motivated behaviors, each new generation will tend to pick up and be controlled by the good old family feeling. and each generation controlled by the inherited genetic influences that were stimulated into activity by the modeling provided by whomever was a power person at that moment. And my offering is that this is literally the dynamic that runs the world. So the person who's being run by a power person dynamic, they need to be yelled at, screamed at, enraged, beaten up, punished? No. They need to be educated as to what's running their minds. And if they have an interest in being free of what's running their minds, then they're going to have to educate themselves and engage in the technology with which to remove those dynamics. Now, a little known fact in the world is that stress is a key factor in which level of behavior is active in controlling the mind. And stress is created by goals, not event. People talk about stressful situations. There are no stressful situations. What somebody calls a stressful situation is a situation in which one has many goals regarding that situation. It isn't the situation that causes the stress. It's the goals that one has when they enter into that situation, the goals that are activated. That determines how deeply stressed they are. Now, it appears to the uneducated observer that events push up against us and determine how hard life is squeezing us. But if you observe really carefully, the truth is, if you have no goals regarding a particular event, there will be no stress involved in experiencing that event. Remember when Dad went berserk when Junior did a particular behavior? And Mom just smiled? What was the difference? Junior did the behavior. If Junior's behavior, as Dad says, is the thing that made him go berserk, then obviously in the presence of that behavior, Mom and you and I and everybody else in the world would have gone berserk. Why did Dad go to berserk and Mom smiled? Dad went off the rails, appeared to go off the rails because of Junior's behavior, but the true cause of the aberrant behavior wasn't Junior's actions. It's that Junior's actions violated a goal Dad had linked to his own internal, unforgiven, we might say, berserkness. Mom, having no berserkness in her, looked at Junior do that and smiled and went, "Isn't that cute?" And that just set Dad off into a whole other level of rage. How dare you think that's cute? Look what he's done to me. Dad, being in that moment a very devout religious member of the one world universal religion of blame, knows that Junior is the cause of his pain and his trauma and his upset. And Mom deserves the brunt of his rage because she thinks that Junior violating Dad's goal is cute and funny. Now, Dad's pain was internal, and Junior was just fulfilling his purpose of giving Dad the opportunity to learn forgiveness. I remember a basic principle about children is that having a child is like having your unconscious mind hang out in true living color and Dolby sound. You know, one of the absolutely wondrous opportunities that we've had with raising our granddaughter, Aria, who we often talk about, of course, seeing how she's such a light in our lives. But one of the amazing opportunities we've had is we've had the tools. You know, I kind of had the tools when my kids were small, but I didn't do nearly as good a job of living it as I do now. But we have the tools, and we've had the opportunity when Aria does something to go, oh, look how that's squeezing me. Look what that's bringing. This is my opportunity to learn forgiveness. And then turn back to recognizing and identifying only with the truth of who she is, rather than passing on the generational insanities. So again, Having a child is like having your unconscious mind hang out in true living color and loud Dolby sound. Everything you've never dealt with, they are going to do. And my offering is that all punishment is nothing but an effort to stop the child from doing what it is that the adult has not yet resolved within their own minds. And that's the flow of life. When you take over your own mind and you learn how to manage your goals, then you learn how to manage your life. You learn how to manage your mind. Refuse to manage your mind, and its generational content will manage your life for you, and it probably won't be pretty. It probably won't be very fulfilling. So what are the three behaviors? When we're in a low or no stress situation, we'll tend to do whatever we did to get along with our power person. Then you go to phase 2, stress starts to build. At that moment, we'll shift into doing. This is a thing called the automatic decision system in the mind. It will kick into gear. And so when that stress starts to build, we'll do whatever we did to resist and survive with our power person. And then when we become ultra-stressed, the mind will counsel us to do what our power person did to us that we absolutely hated the most. Third level of stress, ultra-stress, that's when berserk happens. So every time that life squeezes us, we get to look at that power person dynamic, and we get to look at what we're full of, if you get my drift. Now, most will lie to themselves and engage in the false narrative that they're only steeped in or exuding rage or viciousness or sadness or fear or criticism or condemnation and victimhood, depression, because they've been squeezed. They insist the squeeze is the cause, when in truth, it's only the trigger. We actually had a lady at Heartland, this goes back 35 years ago, and through reality management forgiveness process, she called them trigger sheets, which was a very appropriate title. It wasn't one in the context of what we were doing that I adopted, but it was exactly what the worksheet is about. So pretending that what comes up in the way of words, feelings, and behavior is caused by the squeeze that life gives us, rather than the squeeze revealing the content that's already there, leaves one hiding from themselves the opportunity to heal through the pained underpinnings of their own disturbed repeating states. And it's basically the essence of, why is this happening to me again? And again, you can watch that workshop on our YouTube channel. If you'd like, you can download the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, free from our website. I can't sell you a book. I wish I could, but they're out of print. You can go to Amazon or to eBay, and back 30 years ago when we published the book, we sold enough copies that here we are. Yeah, it's kind of cool. 30 years later, they're always, actually, I just ordered about 20 of them on eBay, different sellers on eBay, so that we have a few of them that I can give away when I meet someone, or we're looking at perhaps doing a teacher training here in Bristol, Virginia in the fall. So I ordered some so that I have books to give out. But you can also just go to our website, whyagain.org, and in the middle of the page, you'll see a cover of the book. Just click on it, drill down, and you can download the book in any one of 9 different languages now. And it's free, so free copy there, or you can order it usually on Amazon. I think I paid this latest round of books that I just bought on. I bought most of them on Amazon, most of them on eBay, and they were like $5 a piece. Almost embarrassing. Brings up embarrassment for me that it looks so cheap. Although there are a couple of copies, and I thought, gee, I should go print that book again and put them on eBay. There's a couple of copies on there, like for $45, $38, crazy. So, the purpose of life I would offer, because that which we hide from ourselves is the cause of literally our so-called physical diseases. The purpose of life is to show it to us, to give us the opportunity to heal, the opportunity to remove the pained underpinnings of these disturbed states, these why is this happening to me again experiences. So the mind that functions in denial tends to overlay events with content, and that blurs the distinction. By so doing, events in a person's life and content aroused by those events are confused, and the mind tricks itself into thinking that events cause content rather than realize that events can only reveal contents. Typical language for those caught up in this error are made up of statements like, you made me mad, you hurt me, you frightened me, you really have a problem. And of course the question becomes, if they're the one with the problem, why am I the one with the pain? And think about it, something what that really doesn't make sense. If they're the one with the problem, of course they'd be the one with the pain. If I have pain and I think it's their problem, perhaps I have a problem that I'm hiding from myself. And life is attempting to show it to me. And these things that are hidden, we call, and it's a totally unnatural state for a human being, we call it the unconscious mind. Hiding something from myself to the point where I lose awareness of it is called dissociation. And how is this state of dissociation created? The simple act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of us is the cause of something happening inside of us is called denial. And living in denial means that I have to dissociate from the real cause of my upset, hiding the content of my own mind, and refuse to allow that content to enter conscious awareness. The result of this error is destructive blame. So blame is the act of putting responsibility outside ourselves for content that belongs to us. And it leaves us stuck in the error of thinking that others have to change in order for us to be happy. And whenever one's in denial or blame, life becomes infinitely more complex because blame brings along its brothers fear and hostility and a whole host of life-destroying emotions. The father of hostility is the desire to anesthetize pain, whose cause appears to be outside of us, but is really within. The mind that's so misled set itself on a path where painful content cannot be removed or resolved because the world it inhabits, the world it perceives, shows only evidence of the self-perpetuating lie that somebody else is to blame for what's felt and experienced. Now one only gets to see evidence of the lie. Someone else is responsible for my pain content. And when I demand an hallucination from my mind, then my mind gives me an hallucination. It's quite literally a state of self-hypnosis. And, breaking away from this self-created false sense of life and self is kind of like a rocket firing into space. There's a gravitational force that acts to keep the rocket in its orbit. And to change it, there must be a force greater than the force generated that allows the rocket to break free of the influence of gravity. And that force is willingness. Self-gravity is called inertia. So enough willingness, and I can start to break through of my denial, dissociating from the content of my own mind and blaming somebody else for it. And the gravity created by the unresolved power person dynamic will tend to prompt you to do behaviors that will have you recreating the same relationship dynamics as your power person did. It's tragic, but that's running the world. So, first century Aramaic forgiveness creates a releasing force that eradicates the pained, disturbed content if you understand how to apply it. The aim of this whole teaching process is to make the first century Aramaic forgiveness process universally available. Again, remembering that forgiveness has nothing to do with the errant Greek idea that you should let us off the hook for the pain generated from within for your own content, but rather it's a tool for removing that pain content. So ask yourself a question. Instantly, without thought, comes up when the stress is elevated. And stress is elevated when someone violates a goal that you hold for them. It was interesting, Jeannie, you had an experience that you shared with me yesterday from someone that you were working with who is former military. And it's such a good example of this principle. Maybe you'd share it. Are you with us, Jeannie?
Yeah, I had to unmute.
Sure, okay.
So this gentleman was working with him, and it wasn't about the forgiveness work. It was I was doing some accounting for him, and he was like, "Okay, well, do this and da da da," and I was like, "Hold on, just a minute," and he just kept going. And I said, "Wait," I said, "Hold on, give me just a second." And he said, what came up for him? He said he could actually feel the anxiety and the nervousness and everything in his body. And what he realized was it was from where he was in service. And, of course, everything was life and death. You had to respond and react immediately, or it could cost your life. And I said, well, realize this isn't life or death, and I need you to hold on while I do something in the spreadsheet, and then I'll direct you to the next step. And so he'd sit there and he'd just breathe, but he got the insight that it was from his military experience that he had to respond immediately. He couldn't wait. He couldn't be patient.
Yeah, and I can add to that, knowing, it's a friend of mine, personal friend, and he was a sergeant in the Korean conflict and lost several men because of following orders and not getting an instant enough response. So there was a great deal of trauma and pain for him around the loss of these lives. And also, as I think about it, he shared with me, there was a great deal of pain at the thought of taking the lives of this person who was protecting their homeland, recognizing he was in a foreign country. And he shared with me that, one of the things that he would do is, they'd be in a situation and these quote-unquote enemies, these people protecting their own homeland, he would shoot over their heads in order to basically scare them off rather than try to kill them, because it wasn't his desire to kill anybody, but lost many of his own men because there wasn't an instant enough response to the orders that he gave. And that's the Korean War. What's that? The 50s, 60s? half a century ago, and being on the telephone, working with Jeannie, and she's helping to straighten out some accounting stuff that we're involved in with him, and he's well acquainted with the work. He's been on the show many times over the years, and was able to recognize that here he is, driven from goals 50 years ago, that I have to have an instant answer. This goal is so important. The powerful line in the Course in Miracles that says you must allow yourself to become aware of the distorting power of the way you want it to be. So what instantly, without thought, comes out of you when a goal isn't met? More importantly, if you'd rather be doing it differently, how did you rid yourself of it? This is really the question of the ages. And if you've ever been controlled by the distortions in perception that we can lock ourselves into with fear and hostility, it takes a lot of courage, a lot of willingness to step up to the plate, and then to acquire the tools and dedicate the time that it takes to heal.
And you have a hand up.
Great. Let's say hello. One more thought before we answer to the hand up, and that is that literally, what we've covered in the last 49 minutes, 44 minutes, whatever it is literally the product of 40 years of full-time, diligent work that invites you to invest the time it takes to understand how the process is applied and what to do to free yourself of these untoward energetic patterns that come out of you when you're squeezed by life. And if you do that, there's a whole lifetime of dividends to be had. So delighted you're here in the conversation, and let's say hello to the caller.
It is Miss Susan, 610. You're on the air.
Hey, gosh, that was great.
Welcome, young lady.
I'm glad you didn't call on me right away when I put up my hand. That thing of as to, rather than just directly forgiving. And then the coffee thing. I've heard the coffee thing, and I've heard, it's amazing how many times I need to hear these things, so that was really good. I had a pile of little questions like, Jeannie, how are your arms?
I would say that they're about 90% better. I had an appointment this morning, and there's a couple of directions that I can't move my arm yet, but it's getting so much better, and I'm thankful.
Oh, that's great. Gosh, what a mystery.
Yeah, she was in here just before the show swinging it around and showing me what she could do. It was pretty cool.
That's great. Question number 2. You're seeing Peter Strinno, right? The friend from Tim and I.
We are going to spend time with Peter in just a few weeks, yes.
Yeah, what
really
kind
looking
of
forward
a race?
to that. Well, actually, when Peter was a kid, he was a champion archer, like for the country of Sweden, as a kid. It was something that he and his father were into.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's combining, he had contacted us some time ago when we started talking about the one-on-one personal intensity into being, Quantum StillPoint intensive, and wanted to do that. And there was an international competition happening in Ohio in July, and he's like, if we can put those two together, I'll go do the competition, then I'll come down to Bristol and do the intensive. So we said, well, actually, Peter, we'd love to see you compete, and it'd be nice to have some time with you. So we rented an Airbnb for a week. So we're going to go up there and be in
that is so
little
cool.
town near Cleveland, Ohio, where he's going to compete. So we'll get to be part of this archery contest, and at the same time, we're going to be doing the Quantum StillPoint intensive, personal intensive with him.
Hi, I'm here. Tim just popped in and asked me a question.
Huh.
I'll do it.
Okay.
I'll do it after the show. Okay, Tim? Okay. Peter was a very special, powerful person for me. He actually was the trigger that caused me to do a lot of work at that retreat. And
he'll
I
be
am
thrilled
now
to hear
going,
that.
well, I don't know if he would or
I'll
not.
let him know it was all his fault.
Well, I've been going over old journals, and when you mentioned the thing in the Course in Miracles about how powerful an unmet goal is, however you worded that, I had years and years and years of getting attached to people, wanting them, people who were not available one way or another, emotionally not interested or not there. And I didn't want them to be there on one level because I was married to Tim Bingham and wasn't planning to not be married to Tim Bingham. But I had all this going on, and Peter was one of those triggers. He did some powerful work then and showed a lot of feelings, and I had to do a lot of work on myself not to want to be the instrument of consoling him, which is an old issue. I wanted to take care of my mother, help her feel better. I figured she was hitting us because she was so unhappy. It was all twisted up. But when I saw Peter grieving, going through such stuff, I wanted to be the person who could go in there and console him. He didn't need that. And I knew he didn't need that, but that unmet goal was, talk about squeezing my heart. And he was the chance for me to do a lot of work there on that particular issue, which has been part of the major issue of my life. And it's really shocking to me to see how powerful those longings have been all my life. One person or another or another or another. Male or female, it made no difference. I would get attached and learn about something they needed or wanted and couldn't, and watch their discomfort, their sorrow, grief, whatever it was, and I wanted to be the one to console them. And it was amazing to have, even talk about it, I'd be, yay, somebody's going to see Peter. Now, I'm fine now, but it does morph to it goes from one person to another. And there's always somebody in my life that I feel that way toward. So it's impersonal.
As in, why are they doing this to me again?
Yeah, well, I know full well they aren't doing it. That doesn't stop the trigger, though. What I get to do is just observe it. I'm that far. Yeah. I'm that far. But I'm not further than that. It's still an issue, and I'm so glad to have gotten as old as I am to have the chance to clear up as much as I have, but it's just not over yet. Mm-hmm. So. No. And I had a therapist once who, I was in the middle of one of these, trigger relationships, non-relationships, I should say. They're usually nothing happening in them. And he said, this is like an addiction, and addiction is usually a manifestation or a symptom of depression. And I read that in my journal. I'd forgotten this kindly doctor said that to me one day years ago. And I don't know what you think about that. What do you think?
Fits perfectly. Yeah, addiction, yeah. I have pain. It's something I don't want to deal with, and oftentimes that pain is going to be some form of anger that's turned inward, some form of depression. That's pretty, I'd say pretty common. Yep.
Yeah. He also
every
said
addiction is a manifestation of denial and dissociation.
Well, yeah, and that this can help me, which isn't true. Yeah. I was going through 25 years of my daughter with an abusive husband who wouldn't allow her to be in touch with us. So there was 25 years of thinking we had lost my daughter. And she's so fully back now. But one thing this same young doctor said to me was, she left because she knew you were going to day, she wouldn't have been so harsh with you or have done that to you if she thought you might just cut bait and leave. Whether he was right or not, it was one of the most consoling things anybody could have said to me. So there's
trusted
that. So she trusted me enough to really be awful for quite a while. Anyway, so thanks
can you imagine?
For the show. What?
Can you imagine the stress that she was under to have that behavior? And what I hear you saying is it was based in hostility. Remember, hostility is an anesthetic. And how much pain was she in that she expressed that level of hostility in order to anesthetize what she was going through?
Yeah. Incredible. I know.
Yeah.
And she doesn't
holding the
want
space.
to talk. Thanks. She doesn't want, she's very happy, and we're very good friends. It's just so delicious. But she doesn't want to process that stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to read her
maybe still too heavy.
Yeah, it probably is. She wants to just be away from any association or thoughts about this ex-husband. And yet her kids are still under his thumb, the two younger ones. One is about to leave for Colombia for 2 weeks to be with his dad, and he's nervous. So anyway.
Holding the space.
Thank you. Thanks. So.
All right.
Thanks. All levels.
Well, we are down to the last minute. It just whispered in my ear that the show's complete. But I do have a thought to offer, and that is that if I remember correctly, I think the house that we have rented is a 3-bedroom house. So if you'd like to come visit with Peter, you could do that.
Well,
The invitation's there. I would suspect he'd be delighted. And it would certainly be a change of pace in your life, wouldn't it?
He would not be delighted. My first response is, he doesn't want me there. Okay, worksheet.
Next step.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, Michael. Good stuff.
Delighted and honored, young lady. Appreciate